She had carried silver trays through that boardroom for 3 years, but today, Ruth Langston saw the trap before any of the men in suits did. She steadied her breath. The boardroom shimmered under the golden light of a chandelier as fragile as it was expensive. The long marble table was lined with paper-thin contracts, and people who had never once looked her in the eye. But she heard it. The phrase, spoken in clipped Gulf Arabic, carefully phrased legal language that dressed deceit in diplomacy. They wouldn't hear it. They didn't speak it. But she did. Her father used to say, "They'll never see you until you speak. And then they'll pretend they always did." He had marched once, coat zipped to the throat, arm locked with neighbors who never made the history books. She remembered that version of him now. Not the man in hospice, not the frail shell, but the fighter who believed the smallest voice could rupture concrete. Ruth adjusted her grip on the silver tray as she placed the last bottle of water beside the translator. Her name tag caught the light. Just Ruth, printed neatly. No title, no history, no story. She straightened. Her fingers trembled just slightly, but she lifted her chin. "Excuse me," she said, not loud, but sharp enough to cut. The translator blinked. A dozen heads turned, some confused, some offended. The Gulf partners leaned back, unsure what they'd just heard. The American executives tensed like they'd heard a bomb tick. "That clause," she continued in English, "what Mr. DeWitt just said, it wasn't protective. It was conditional override." Then, without pause, she repeated it in Arabic. Slowly. Exactly as Martin DeWitt had phrased it moments ago, word for word. And then, still in Arabic, she added, "It implies that your firm may revoke all decisions made by the board in the future without consent." The room dropped 10 degrees. Silence layered in shock. Martin, sitting confidently with one hand draped over a leather portfolio, blinked. His smile faded. "Pardon me," he said. "Who are you?" "I'm a server," Ruth said evenly, "and a former investment compliance advisor." One of the Gulf partners leaned forward. "She's correct." His voice was calm, but his eyes were steel. That clause could unravel everything. Clayton Sorrell, the firm's senior counsel, cleared his throat. "This is not protocol. She has no standing to speak in this room." The translator looked down, visibly sweating. Ruth did not step back. The room shifted. Not completely, but enough. Enough for a man near the end of the table, someone she didn't recognize, to murmur, "Let her finish. She might be right." She nodded toward the document. "It's not the words that are dangerous. It's what they pretend not to mean." A long, thin crack appeared in the air. Not literal, but emotional. The illusion of control wavered. The CEO of North Pines Gulf Division, Sheikh Hamid Al-Fayed, sat at the head of the table. He hadn't spoken yet. His face was carved from patience and judgment, but now he leaned slightly forward. "You understand this clause?" he asked in Arabic. "Yes," Ruth replied, "and I understand the tactic. Strategic ambiguity." There was a beat, a narrowing of eyes, a testing of metal. "You're not part of this negotiation," Clayton said again, sharper now. "Security." "Leave her," the Sheikh said quietly. It silenced everything. Ruth felt her heart thudding, felt the room tilt. She bowed her head slightly. "I meant no disrespect," she said, "but I couldn't stay quiet." The translator stood and left without a word. Martin DeWitt leaned back, face unreadable, But Ruth saw his fingers tapping the edge of his folder once, twice, 3 times. Morse code for fury. She turned and walked out slowly, tray in hand. Past the suited men who had ignored her, past the gleaming sculpture no one noticed, through the staff door that barely clicked shut behind her. Her heels echoed on the service hallway tiles, each step landing heavier than the last. As the elevator descended, her fingers trembled. She had just interrupted a multi-billion-dollar negotiation. Exposed legal sleight of hand. On paper, she'd committed career suicide, except she didn't have a career anymore. Just uniforms, trays, and memories. Somewhere between the 30th and 20th floors, her shoulders dropped. She didn't know what would happen next. But she had spoken. She had stepped into the room, not with power, but with truth. She stepped into the staff lounge. It smelled of reheated soup and lemon cleaner. Camille looked up from folding napkins. Her eyes widened. "Girl, what did you just do?" Ruth gave a faint smile. "I might have said something I wasn't supposed to." Camille squinted. "Too much or just enough?" Ruth let out a breath. "I don't know yet. I don't know. Maybe both." She went to her locker. Her hands were still shaking, but something else had settled in her chest. A quiet certainty. "Someone up there's pacing right now," Camille said. "Can feel it. You stirred the air, Ruthie." And Ruth said nothing, but her fingers brushed the smooth face of the compass inside her coat pocket. The same one her father carried through marches and boardrooms alike. Her locker door clanged shut, and she leaned her forehead against the cool metal. From somewhere behind her, Camille added, "They saw you today. And that can't be undone." As Ruth turned toward the hallway that led to the service exit, a man in a gray suit passed her without looking. But just as the door swung shut behind him, she caught a whisper from behind the swinging tray door. "She's not done yet." "You embarrassed this hotel," her supervisor spits, pacing the tiny break room. "You weren't hired to think." The room stinks of scorched coffee and boiled carrots, but it's the bitterness in Mr. Pelham's voice that clings hardest. Ruth stands by the lockers, arms folded, apron still tied. Her tray is back on the shelf. Her name badge is gone. She didn't bother to put it back on. She traces the edge of the compass in her apron pocket, the cool brass catching on her fingertip. Her father had given it to her the week she left Abu Dhabi, before the world turned on its axis. "Don't lose your direction just because the room spins," he'd said. And now the room is spinning again, just in a different currency. Pelham's face is flushed. "You know what this place runs on? Predictability. People doing what they're told. Not some vigilante stunt in the middle of a diplomatic deal." Ruth doesn't flinch. "I spoke the truth." "And who asked you to?" he snaps. She doesn't answer. Because someone did. Not with words, but with their silence, with their refusal to see. And now that she's been seen, truly seen, there's no going back. The break room door swings open without a knock. Marietta Sloane steps inside like a blade, sleek in black, her gray streak pulled into a tight bun. She doesn't greet either of them. She just looks at Pelham. "She stays," Marietta says, voice level. "You can go." Mr. Pelham sputters, half laughs. "Excuse me?" "She stays," Marietta repeats, turning fully toward Ruth. "We have work." Pelham opens his mouth, but whatever argument he's about to launch dies on his tongue when he sees the look in her eyes. Not fury, not even authority, just precision, calculated, cold, and final. He scoffs, grabs his tablet from the counter, and stalks out without another word. When the door clicks shut, Ruth lets out a long breath. Marietta studies her. "Sit," she says. "You're not fired. Yet." Ruth raises an eyebrow. "Comforting." Marietta gives the faintest of smiles, more like a muscle twitch than warmth. "You recognize the clause. Fluent Arabic. Former compliance work. You've been hiding in plain sight." "I wasn't hiding," Ruth says. "I was surviving." A beat. Marietta nods once. "I need you to look at something," she says, pulling a thick binder from her bag. She places it gently on the metal table between them. "This is the updated negotiation draft. Every clause. Every footnote." Ruth blinks. "You want me to?" "Fix it," Marietta says. "Mark anything questionable, especially the legacy language around override and decision jurisdiction. If you're right about that clause, there may be more. I want a full markup by tomorrow morning." The binder lands heavy, not just in sound, but in implication. "I'm not a lawyer anymore," Ruth says softly. Marietta shrugs. "Good. The ones I've hired missed it." Ruth opens the cover. The font is small. The paper smells like toner and secrets. "You're putting yourself on the line," Ruth says. Marietta's expression doesn't change. "I already did. The moment I didn't stop them from dragging you out." That surprises Ruth. She looks up. "I wanted to see what you'd do," Marietta admits. "They all did." "And now?" "Now," Marietta says, standing. "I want to see what you're capable of." She leaves without waiting for another word. Hours later, Ruth sits in her apartment with the binder open across her kitchen table. Her place is quiet, save for the gentle clank of her radiator and the low rumble of the Q train in the distance. The light flickers from a lamp she rescued from a stoop 2 winters ago. Everything in her life has been patched together. But her mind has always been sharp. She picks up a red pen, then a blue, then finally settles on a green highlighter. Colors mean clarity. They always have. Red for threats, blue for slants, green for traps. She learned that system back in Dubai, when she still believed she could fix broken systems from within, SOTA 6.3. 12. She underlines a phrase that sounds diplomatic, but implies unilateral authority. She writes a note in the margin. Re-verify Article 27 compliance, specifically the override by consensus rule. Her handwriting is neat, angled slightly upward. She reads on, annotates, cross-references. By 2:00 a.m., her eyes sting, and her tea has gone cold. She remembers one of her final cases before resigning from international consulting, a clause hidden inside a telecom merger that transferred data rights in perpetuity. No one caught it. She did. The deal went through anyway. She closes the binder halfway, rubs her temple. Maybe nothing she does will change the outcome. Maybe she's just a footnote again. But still, she returns to the page. Because if she doesn't do this, who will? At 4:15 a.m., her phone buzzes with a message from an unknown number. "We noticed your voice. Careful who hears it next." She stares at it for a long time. Doesn't delete it. Doesn't reply. She simply returns to the binder, flips the next page, and marks another clause in red. As dawn begins to touch the edges of her blinds, she leans back. Half the binder is bleeding with notes. Her fingers ache. But there's a strange sense of peace blooming behind her ribs. She's not just cleaning rooms anymore. She's cleaning rot. The radiator lets out one last groan as the heat settles, and Ruth whispers aloud into the quiet. "I'm not going back to silence." "They think I'll blink," Ruth whispers to herself, scrolling through a contract where the fraud lives inside footnotes. She sits alone in the far corner of the 35th floor legal division, the quiet hum of servers and filtered air the only sound around her. It's nearly midnight. Everyone else has gone home, but Ruth stayed drawn deeper into the documents with each highlighted clause. The language is ornate, but the structure is familiar. Deception doesn't shout. It hides in commas and conditional verbs. And this deception runs deep. The glow of the desk lamp throws sharp shadows across her notes. Paragraph 11.4. Contingency exemptions may be authorized under region-specific guidelines. It's a rerouting clause, innocuous on the surface, but underneath, a license to siphon. She leans closer, scanning the footnote trail. Her finger traces the dotted line across jurisdictions Cyprus, Zurich, Nevada. A triangular echo of the same funds. She remembers her old mentor in Abu Dhabi once warning her, if they ask you to sign quickly, there's something they don't want you to see. Ruth wasn't signing this time. She was peeling it back. The window beside her reflects a faint image of herself, backlit and sleepless, eyes wide but steady. Her apartment had always been quiet, but this silence here in the legal division after hours felt charged, like someone might be watching or waiting. She presses in further, running a script that flags anomalies across shell vendors used in a 2018 infrastructure project. It pings red. The listed recipient for a clean water initiative in Missouri is the same Cayman-registered firm, now linked to recent hospital audits in Louisiana. Same officers, different names, hidden behind layers. At first, it looks like clever money shifting. Then she finds the invoice amounts $23 million routed through channels that all end at a firm called Harrow Creek Holdings, registered out of Sparks, Nevada. The name means nothing at first. But then she runs the list of signatories and finds one. M. DeWitt. Ruth's hand pauses mid-air. It's not proof, not yet. But it's close. She grabs her encrypted drive, plugs it into the station, and starts copying everything she's uncovered. The progress bar moves slowly, a green glow pulsing in the dark. A chime sounds from the door console. Ruth freezes. She wasn't expecting anyone. Security should have locked the floor by now. She closes the laptop halfway and listens. Another chime. Not loud. Not aggressive, just deliberate. A knock follows. She stands, heart in her throat. Walks slowly to the hallway. Peeks through the glass slit beside the door. A man in a charcoal overcoat stands there. No visible ID. No logo. He doesn't shift or knock again. Just stands there, staring into the door into her. Ruth backs away, quietly shuts off the monitor, unplugs the drive, grabs her coat, slips out through the emergency stairwell. By the time she reaches street level, her breath is short and her pulse rapid. She doesn't recognize the man. But his stillness, that's what unnerved her. Not the presence, but the intention. She heads home with the drive zipped into her inner coat pocket. Her apartment welcomes her with the warm scent of lemon balm tea still lingering from the day before. The quiet is comforting, but she double-checks her locks, then pulls her curtains closed. Sitting on the couch, she turns on only the kitchen light. Dim, flickering, safe. She texts Marietta. I was breached. Meeting off-site only. No reply. Not yet. At 2:12 a.m., a second unknown number sends a message. Some things are too old to dig up. Be careful what you carry. Ruth doesn't reply. She just places the drive into her freezer inside a bag of frozen okra. It's an old trick from her father's days on the force. Cold delays data wipe attempts. She returns to her table, pours herself tea, and sits in the half-dark, eyes open, hands calm. It wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just contracts. It was public money, stolen from invisible people. Rural towns, tribal lands, marginalized clinics. The theft wasn't just financial. It was systemic. She remembers Camille once saying, "No one notices what's taken until they feel the cold." And this is a chill that runs nationwide. By dawn, Ruth's decision is made. She will not walk away. She will not bury what she found. But the rules are different now. She can't work alone. She needs allies, proof, and above all, protection. As the first light bleeds into her blinds, Ruth opens her laptop again. She searches an old contact. Angela Kim, compliance officer, North Pine Capital. Then, with trembling fingers, she drafts a new message, one sentence, encrypted and untraceable. "I have something you missed. Meet me where the red statue stands. Bring no phones." The cursor blinks once. Then she hits send. "You're 2 minutes late," Angela says, stepping out from behind the base of the statue. The massive red sculpture looms over the small plaza near Union Square, its abstract steel limbs stretched skyward like frozen fire. The cold morning air stings Ruth's cheeks as she tightens her scarf. She glances at the bronze plaque on the pedestal. "Resilience Through Flame" by Elias Knox, 1981. How fitting. "I had to walk a different way," Ruth says quietly. "Someone followed me yesterday." Angela's face tightens, but she doesn't respond immediately. Instead, she gestures toward the bench behind the statue, shielded from the sidewalk by tall concrete planters. It's not truly private, but in the buzz of New York morning foot traffic, it's just obscure enough. They sit. Angela Kim, once Ruth's fiercest rival in audit hearings overseas, now wears the uniform of high-stakes integrity. Navy blazer, subtle pearl studs, hair pulled tight. Her expression hasn't changed since Dubai, still sharp as broken glass, and just as unapologetic. "Tell me what you found," she says. Ruth opens her coat and pulls out a slim folder. Inside are printouts of 3 contract excerpts, marked with precise notations. She slides them over. Angela scans quickly. Clause by clause, her eyebrows rise. Then knit. Then lift again. When she finishes, she sets the papers down with deliberate care. "You ran a secondary ledger audit," she says. Ruth nods. 4 layers deep. "You saw Harrow Creek Holdings? And the false invoicing across multiple jurisdictions." Angela exhales slowly. "How much have you compiled?" "Enough to connect Martin DeWitt directly, and at least 2 board members by association." Angela leans back, staring at the morning light filtering between buildings. "Ruth, this could blow apart more than just the firm. These contracts are interlinked with federal infrastructure funding, clean water grants, tribal health projects." "I know." Angela's voice lowers. "You could be buried for this." Ruth meets her gaze. "Then I want it done right." Angela folds her arms. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who flagged Article 27 in the Gulf merger 6 years ago. You saw through gloss then. You'll see through this now." Angela doesn't respond right away. Then, "I'll need help. If I bring this internal, it'll be sanitized before it sees daylight." "Then don't take it internal," Ruth says. "Not yet." Angela studies her for a long moment. then reaches into her bag and pulls out a phone, an old flip model, disconnected from any network. She hands it to Ruth. "One number. When you're ready to drop it, call this man. He runs an independent oversight agency tied to federal contractors. He's buried 2 firms bigger than North Pine." "Why not just call him now?" Angela shakes her head. "You're not ready yet. We need a timeline, a document chain, a full map of the fraud structure. If you go now, they'll claim clerical error and walk." Ruth slips the phone into her pocket. "What about you?" she asks. "If they find out you helped me—" Angela's mouth twists slightly. "They won't. I've been underestimated longer than most men have had careers. Let them keep looking past me." A gust of wind stirs Ruth's coat. She looks at the sculpture again. The red steel doesn't move, but it feels alive, twisted, forged, enduring. She looks back at Angela. "I need someone else too. Someone with access to the North Pine education portfolio. That's where the misfiled ledger code originated." Angela narrows her eyes. "Lena." "Yes." "She's still in? After what they did to her?" She might be the only one who understands how they disguised the offsets. Angela exhales again. "I'll arrange it, but Ruth, be smart. You're not just uncovering numbers. You're threatening power." "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore," Ruth says quietly. Later that afternoon, Ruth meets Lena in the atrium of the Midtown Public Library. Lena steps in wearing oversized sunglasses and a second-hand trench coat, but she peels them off as soon as she sees Ruth. "You picked the library?" Lena mutters. "What is this? A spy novel?" Ruth smiles. "It's neutral ground." They sit near the glass windows overlooking Bryant Park. Ruth slides over a flash drive. Lena plugs it into her tablet. She begins scanning. Her jaw tightens. "This isn't just diversion," she whispers. "This is reappropriation." Ruth nods. "They're stealing from future generations." Lena swipes to another file. This is my old ledger from North Pine Youth Programs. These funds were earmarked for rural STEM labs. And now they're gone." Ruth watches Lena's fingers hover over the screen. Her nails are chipped, her hands shake, but her eyes burn. "You're really doing this?" Lena asks. "Yes." "You could lose everything." "I already did." Lena's mouth twitches. "Then let's lose it together." They don't hug. They don't shake hands. Just a small nod between women who know what the cost of silence has already been. As Ruth exits into the crisp evening light, her phone buzzes. A new number. A message. "We know who you're meeting. Stop now. Final warning." Ruth doesn't flinch. She types back one word. "No." The voice message lasts only 8 seconds. "If you move one more step, you'll lose your name." Ruth listens to it twice, standing in the middle of her apartment at 3:47 a.m., her hands curled tight around her phone. There's no ID, no traceable signal, no metadata. She's seen this tactic before, used it even in another life, another suit, before her silence became uniform. But what chills her now isn't the threat. It's how calm the voice sounds. Not angry, not panicked, just tired. Like someone who's been allowed to do this for too long. The file is almost ready. Everything she and Lena compiled: redirected funds, forged invoices, misappropriated tribal grants, sealed audit flags, signature chains has been formatted, cross-indexed and encrypted onto 3 separate drives. One for herself, one for Angela. One she'll drop into a lockbox at her father's old precinct, listed under an alias she hasn't used in 17 years. It's time to bring in the last piece. At 9:00 a.m., sharp, Ruth walks into a quiet gallery space inside the Al Rashid Hotel's executive wing. Velvet-lined walls, a long, curved display counter. Inside it, a collection of historical hotel documents, community awards, and a massive bronze key that once unlocked the original family suite. Its curated pride, polished and arranged for dignitaries and donors. Eli stands at the far end, dressed not in a suit, but a gray cashmere sweater, hands folded behind his back, as he studies an oil portrait of his grandfather. Ruth takes a moment to watch him. He seems almost unaware of his wealth here lost, not in thought, but in silence. She clears her throat gently. He turns. "I wondered when you'd come," Eli says. His voice is softer in this room, almost reverent. "I need 10 minutes, she says. "You have 5, he replies. But he gestures toward a side seating area tucked beneath a hanging garden display ferns, soft white orchids, and creeping ivy suspended in glass. They sit. Ruth places the drive on the table between them. "You're on the board," she says, "whether you wanted it or not. You're one of 4 votes not yet tied to the fraudulent shell accounts. I ran the signatures. Yours isn't there." Eli blinks, lips pressing into a tight line. "That's not an accident." "No," Ruth agrees. "That's why I'm here." He picks up the drive, examines it like it's a foreign object. "And if I plug this in?" he asks. "You'll see what your name has been used to protect. What Martin and the others are laundering beneath your grandfather's memorial funds." Eli doesn't look at her. He stares at the orchids swaying above them. "You think legacy is clean?" he says, almost to himself. "My grandfather funded this hotel on oil, backroom deals, and a newspaper that ran front-page propaganda during the war. My mother smiled through every ribbon cutting while she let a whole generation disappear under her nose. And you want me to... What? Pick a side? I want you to remember who paid for that bronze key in the glass case," Ruth says. "Because it wasn't the people who own this hotel. It was the communities they took from to build it." Eli finally meets her gaze. "What if I help you and lose everything?" "Then maybe," Ruth replies, "you'll finally be free to build something that matters." He stares at her, jaw tight, breath shallow. Then he pockets the drive. "When?" he asks. "Tonight," Ruth says. Board review begins at 8:00 p.m. Internal audit sign-off hits their server by 7:30. You have until then to log an anonymous objection to the fiduciary structure. Eli nods slowly. "And after that?" "They'll know," she says, "and the walls will start to crack." He rises, leaves without another word. That evening, Ruth sits alone in the tech room beneath the hotel's server corridor. Angela has rerouted the mirror network for 1 hour. Lena's diversion has delayed the security team with a false alert about a water main rupture on floor 24. Ruth, for her part, has accessed the internal policy archive for one final upload. She hovers over the submit button, the report loaded and encrypted. Ethics breach summary. Al Rashid Holdings. Public asset fraud. A timer blinks in the corner. 7:29. She closes her eyes. Thinks of her father's calloused hand closing over hers the day she first read a legal statute aloud. Thinks of the little girls in Missouri schools who were supposed to get science labs. Thinks of the smell of that boardroom and how they never expected her to speak. She clicks submit. The screen flashes. Then goes black. And the words appear. Access blocked. Administrative override engaged. Ruth stares, unblinking. A new file loads one she did not open. It's a recording. Martin DeWitt's voice. If you're hearing this, Ruth, it means you tried. And it means you failed. Her hands curl into fists. Then the voice continues. But maybe you're not alone anymore. There are 3 identical drives, and only one has been compromised. Ruth knows this as she walks through the East Wing corridor of the Al Rashid Hotel, her heels muffled on the plush Persian runner, her fingers curled around the hem of her coat. Angela warned her. The mirror upload could be intercepted, the main network rerouted. That's why they printed a fail-safe 3 encrypted drives, one of which was hand-delivered yesterday. She just doesn't know which one made it through. Security is visibly heightened. 2 new men in dark suits stand outside the glass doors to the conference suite. No lapel pins, no hotel badges. Federal, maybe. Or worse, private security hired by the board. Ruth flashes her outdated staff badge. They don't stop her. She's invisible again, as they always assumed she would be. Inside, the room is colder than it should be. The long mahogany table stretches beneath a crystal chandelier. 12 high-backed chairs. 11 are filled. At the head, Martin DeWitt sits as if nothing has changed, fingers steepled, smiling faintly like a man already celebrating. He doesn't even look at her. But Marietta does. She's seated 3 places down, her posture ramrod straight, hair pinned in its usual coiled perfection. A legal pad resting on the table before her blank, as always. She nods once, a signal Ruth recognizes from years ago. Not yet. At the far end, Eli enters. No sweater today. He's in a navy suit, pressed and deliberate, holding a manila folder under his arm. Martin rises. Before we begin tonight's quarterly audit review, he says, voice smooth as polished oak, I want to personally thank our longtime partners in compliance and integrity for their continued discretion and service. He casts a glance toward Ruth. No one claps. It's not that kind of meeting. We'll now proceed with authorization of the new offshore restructuring policies for regional contracts, Martin continues. All board votes are recorded digitally and anonymized per our latest bylaws. The room darkens slightly as the smart screens lower from the ceiling. Votes may begin, says the voice of the internal AI system. Ruth feels her throat tighten. This is the moment. She looks toward Marietta. Still nothing. The screens blink. Vote 1 recorded. Martin nods. Vote 2 recorded. Eli remains still. Vote 3 recorded. Ruth's fingers dig into her coat pocket. The second drive, the one Lena handed off to Angela, was supposed to be read automatically by the ethics verification script. If it was triggered, the vote would halt and initiate an audit alert. Vote 4 recorded. Still nothing. She looks at Eli. He rises, places the manila envelope on the table, and opens it. I'd like to interrupt the vote, Eli says. Martin lifts his eyebrows, smiling like a father amused by a child. You don't have authority to interrupt, Mr. Rashid, he says evenly. Actually, Marietta says, rising, he does. Clause 13.1 of the Foundation Oversight Charter allows a fiduciary board member to submit a secondary ethics concern prior to formal policy ratification. Martin blinks. For the first time, it's not performative. Eli pulls out a document, clean, stapled, dated. The room's attention shifts. This, Eli says, voice steady, is a signed declaration of fraud suspicion under federal contractor statutes. It includes evidence of unauthorized fund reallocation, forged invoice approvals, and shell vendor laundering through Harrow Creek Holdings. Martin's jaw tightens. Ruth Williams compiled it, Eli continues, with corroboration from a former compliance officer and an external auditor. Martin leans forward. This is slander. No, Marietta says sharply. This is whistleblower protocol. The room stills. Then, without warning, one of the smart screens flashes red. An alert banner scrolls across the top. Integrity protocol triggered. All current votes suspended. Audit override engaged. Angela's voice comes through the room's speaker system, not live, but pre-recorded. To all board members present, this is a formal notice. Your current policy authorization has been suspended pending investigation. All fund transfers will be frozen. Legal counsel has been notified. Silence. Martin rises slowly, jaw set, nostrils flaring. You don't understand what you've done, he says. Yes, Ruth says quietly, stepping forward. We do. Martin's gaze lands on her. You'll regret this. She doesn't flinch. I've lived with regret, she replies. This isn't it. Security enters the room. A man in a gray windbreaker shows his badge Office of Federal Oversight. 2 others follow. Martin doesn't resist. But he smiles. As he's led out, he whispers to Ruth. The board wasn't the top. Ruth watches him go, a slow knot forming in her gut. Later, alone in the hallway, Ruth stands at the window overlooking the city. Lights twinkle like silent witnesses to everything below. She opens her phone. A message blinks from an unknown contact. Third signal received. Still watching. Ready when you are. Ruth stares at the screen, lips parting slightly. She types a reply. Then let's finish what they started. She didn't ask for redemption. She never wanted the spotlight, the titles, or the standing ovation that came when the truth finally cracked open the walls of silence. Ruth Williams only wanted something to last, something honest. Something that bore her father's fingerprints, and her mother's quiet insistence that dignity isn't granted by men in suits, but claimed by women who choose not to look away. When the board collapsed under its own rot, and Martin DeWitt's web of fraud unraveled across jurisdictions, the world saw headlines. They saw numbers. They saw ethics violations, audits, resignations, emergency injunctions. But what they didn't see, what most people never do, was the weight that had lived inside Ruth for decades. The weight of invisibility, of being the one who knew, who had always known, and had stayed quiet because there was no room at the table, no microphone, no audience that listened without judgment. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. After the investigations concluded and Eli took a voluntary leave from the hotel's public board, he sent Ruth only one message. It was never yours to fix alone, but you made it possible for the rest of us to even try. Ruth printed that message. She folded it neatly and placed it beside her father's final ledger notebook, still smudged with coffee stains and clipped newspaper articles he never had the chance to finish. She placed both in a fireproof box beneath her apartment floorboards, not to hide them, but to remember that legacy is something you carry, not something you own. Angela never spoke publicly again. Her work moved quietly, pushing through reform across multiple firms, one clause at a time. Lena returned to teaching, opening a small community law clinic in a Brooklyn basement with uneven tile floors and an open-door policy that reminded Ruth of the family kitchen her mother once ran, always full of voices and hard questions. And Marietta, always the quiet observer, retired 2 months after the final report. No speeches, no ceremonies. Just a handwritten note delivered to Ruth's apartment. Not all revolutions need parades. Some only need women who refuse to flinch. Ruth didn't take the global position she was offered. Instead, she drafted the foundational code of ethics that now governs 10 corporate accountability councils across the United States. Her name isn't listed on the bylaws. That was intentional, because Ruth understood something too few ever do, that real change is quieter than we think. It doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives when silence finally breaks. Years later, a small bronze plaque was installed in the lobby of the Al Rashid Hotel. Not in the main entrance where donors passed through, but in a side hallway that connected the staff locker room to the service elevators. The plaque reads, "In honor of Ruth Williams, whose integrity outlasted convenience." No photo, just the words. And the words were enough. Because every maid who passes that plaque on their way to the laundry room, every dishwasher coming off a 14-hour shift, every young woman trying to balance truth and survival, they know. They whisper it to each other in the early hours, when no one else is listening. They remember that someone once stood up, not because she was fearless, but because she was tired of watching others pretend the ground wasn't crumbling. Ruth walks slower now. She wears her hair looser, lets herself smile more easily. Some mornings she still wakes before dawn, out of habit, more than worry. On one of those mornings, she returned to that sculpture near Union Square, the red one, limbs stretched like a scream held in steel. She sat on the bench beneath it and watched the sunlight spill across its surface. Angela joined her. No words were exchanged for 10 minutes. Then Ruth said, "I wonder how many women sat here before us, wondering if they'd made enough noise." Angela just smiled. "We didn't make noise," she said. "We made structure." That was the difference. Ruth never got the apology she deserved from the board. But she got something better. She got to rebuild the room where decisions were made, and this time, she chose who was allowed in. The girl who once swept conference rooms before dawn now drafts the codes they all must follow. The woman who was told she wasn't authorized to speak now authors the rules others must obey. She carries no bitterness, only clarity. Because Ruth knows that in a world built on silence, truth is a kind of inheritance too. And legacies? They aren't forged in nameplates or marble floors. They're written in the lives made freer by someone else's courage. Her philosophy remains: speak, even if your voice trembles because someone is always listening. If you felt the weight of Ruth's journey, if you believe dignity must be protected, not inherited, then leave a number 1 in the comments. And subscribe to our channel to hear the next story, because the silence ends here.